dear friends, it is popular in today's church to speak of making a decision for Christ. Now, there's of course value in this. We do need to recognize our capacity to choose to follow Jesus or not. But what is missed in this kind of language is God's choice for us. This Sunday we have been reminded about the boy Samuel, who learned to hear God's call for the first time. And we read about that in 1 Samuel 3, verses 1 to 20. And we've also read about the disciple Nathanael, who, in spite of his initial skepticism, was called by Jesus to follow in John chapter 1, verses 43 to 51. Both of these stories show that God takes the initiative in inviting us, calling us to live our lives in alignment with God's presence, God's purposes, and God's priorities. In both of these stories, the relationship began with God revealing God's self to the person. As they then encountered God's glory, they found themselves irresistibly drawn to God, and their lives were changed. Then, as a result of this encounter, they became people who reflected God's glory and proclaimed God's message to their world. Nathanael got a big surprise when he met Jesus. Having heard where Jesus was from, he had all sorts of prejudices that made him skeptical of Philip's recommendation. But then, when he met Jesus, everything changed. Not because of anything he did, but because of the way Jesus revealed God's glory to him. The image Jesus uses of the angels ascending and descending comes, of course, from the ancient story of Jacob's ladder, and we can read about that in Genesis 28, verses 10 to 22. The trickster Jacob was on the run from his angry brother, whom he had tricked one too many times. Then one night, as he slept, God revealed God's glory to him in a dream of angels ascending and descending on a stairway to heaven. And with the vision came God's promise and God's call for Jacob to be God's instrument of blessing to the nations. Now, with Nathanael, Jesus uses this image to show that he, Jesus, is the one who reveals God's glory to the world and who offers a stairway to heaven, a way to encounter God's glory and be part of God's purpose. The starting point, my friends, though, is always God's choice to manifest God's glory. This week, why not seek to prepare yourself for God's self-revelation? Why not open your heart and your senses to the glory of God around you and listen for God's call on your life? Then, as God reveals God's self to you, respond by committing again to follow Christ and to proclaim Christ's message through your own life. In what ways may God be seeking to reveal God's glory to you in Christ this week? How can you open yourself more to this glory and allow it to change and challenge you. God's glory is not hidden, or as hidden as we may suppose. Usually, when I miss God's glory, the problem is not with God, but with my ability to see. The best way to learn to recognize God's presence all around us, I have learned, is to practice the discipline of wonder. The discipline of wonder. This week, try to slow down a little and look for the wonder in the ordinary things around you. Plants and animals, people and circumstances. Then, my friend, as you notice God's glory, respond by committing yourself to God. Commit yourself with me to proclaim God's message of hope, peace, love, and justice, and equality, and grace, and mercy, and forgiveness, not just through our words, but reflected in and through our lives.